I knew something was wrong the second she lifted her glass and smiled like she was trying to remember how. Her fingers trembled just enough for me to notice, and when she stood from her chair, everyone else quieted the way people do when they sense a storm coming. I kept expecting her to give one of her soft, gentle speeches, the kind that always made me feel like she still chose me, even after all these years. But instead she inhaled slowly, too slowly, and said, in this fragile, cracking voice, "I miss who I used to be." The whole room froze. Even the damn candles looked embarrassed for us. Our friends stared at her, then at me, like I should understand what she meant. But I didn't. I sat there with this strange pressure in my chest, trying to convince myself she was joking, or drunk, or being dramatic in that artsy way of hers she knew I secretly loved. But she wasn't joking. Her eyes weren't playful or teasing or warm. They were distant, almost guilty, like she was confessing something she'd rehearsed alone for weeks. She kept talking, saying things about feeling disconnected, about losing herself, about wanting the girl she used to be back, and every word dug into me like it had been sharpened beforehand. Sometimes she looked at the wall instead of at me, and I hated how familiar that felt, like she'd been practicing avoiding my eyes long before tonight. I forced myself to smile, and I even raised my own glass, pretending I understood. What else was I supposed to do? Throw a scene at our anniversary dinner in front of people who'd known us since we moved to this neighborhood? I laughed too loudly. I said something painfully cheerful, and the whole time she kept glancing away, like she couldn't bear to see how her words were landing on me. When the guests finally left, I tried to play it cool. I hugged her waist from behind as she rinsed dishes, but her body was stiff, her shoulders lifted like she didn't want me touching her. There was still this faint soap and skin scent that always made me want her, always made me pull her close, but tonight she felt hollow, like someone else was inside her body, wearing her softness but none of her warmth. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself she was just tired. I told myself anything I could think of, until the moment everything shifted. Because when the door closed behind the last guest, and I turned to lock it, I saw our neighbor, quiet, withdrawn, avoids eye contact neighbor, standing just outside the porch light. I didn't even hear her walk up. She stepped closer, not looking at my wife at all, just at me, and whispered, "I know why she said that. Come with me." I thought she was drunk, or jealous, or trying to stir up drama. She'd never liked my wife much, and honestly the feeling was mutual. But she didn't smirk or gossip or give me any reason to think she was messing around. Her voice sounded low, urgent, like she'd been waiting for the moment we were alone. My wife asked through the window who was at the door, and the neighbor, this woman who barely ever spoke to us, just whispered, "Not here. Not where she can hear." My stomach tightened in this awful, crawling way. Something was wrong. Something big. And I hated that a part of me already knew my wife's toast wasn't about nostalgia or midlife panic or anything that could be fixed with a weekend getaway and some slow, tired sex in a hotel bed. No. There was something underneath her words. Something sharp. Something she didn't want me to see. The neighbor stepped back, eyes flicking toward her darkened house. "If you want the truth," she murmured, "follow me." I stood there for a few seconds, torn between the woman I loved and the woman holding answers. My wife was in the kitchen, wiping the same spot on the counter over and over, her face pale in the warm light. I could tell she was listening even though she pretended not to be. And when she avoided my eyes again, that was when the dread finally landed with full weight. Something was happening behind my back, and whatever it was, it had been happening for a long time. I followed the neighbor into the night. Her garage smelled like dust and old cardboard, the kind of place where secrets settle in corners and wait for someone desperate enough to look for them. She didn't turn on the overhead light, just a small lamp sitting on a workbench, casting a yellow circle over a laptop and a stack of printed photos. It felt too intimate, too prepared, and I hesitated at the door because something about this was already wrong. "Close it," she whispered, glancing toward the street like someone might be watching. I closed it. The garage went quiet except for the steady hum of the freezer by the wall. She wasn't the type of woman I'd ever imagined pulling me aside in the dark. She kept to herself, wore oversized sweaters even in summer, barely made eye contact when we passed on the sidewalk. But now her face was tight, focused, almost determined. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said, pulling a chair toward me. "But after tonight, you needed to see this." She tapped the laptop keys with shaky fingers, then pulled up a video. The timestamp glowed at the top, 2:17 p.m., 2 weeks ago. I leaned forward, expecting... Honestly, I didn't know what I expected. But when the footage loaded, I felt the air leave my chest. It was my wife, walking into this garage, alone, no hesitation. I stared so hard my eyes burned. She wasn't meeting anyone. She wasn't undressing or doing anything romantic or scandalous. She went straight to the shelves along the back wall and started shuffling through the neighbors' file boxes, searching with purpose, not curious, not confused, like she already knew what she was looking for. Another video, another day, another timestamp. Same thing. My wife sneaking in while the neighbor was gone, digging through drawers, opening envelopes, taking pictures with her phone, moving quickly but not carelessly. And another, and another. The more I watched, the colder I felt. I kept waiting for a man to enter the frame, for the cliché reveal of an affair, something clean and clear and easy to be furious about. But these videos weren't that. They were calculated, almost clinical. And my wife didn't look distressed or lost. She looked focused, determined, like someone following a trail only she understood. "What is this?" I finally asked, my voice rough. "Why didn't you call me? Why not confront her?" The neighbor crossed her arms, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt too close to my ear. "Because your wife isn't just snooping. She's trying to find documents I have. Documents she thinks I don't know she wants." I looked at her, searching for some sign she was lying, but she held my gaze with an intensity I'd never seen from her. It wasn't attraction, although standing this close to her, breathing her warm coffee and perfume breath, I felt tension I wasn't proud of. It was fear, hunger, something deeper. "You need to understand," she said, leaning forward so her sweater brushed my arm. "Your wife is involved in something dangerous, and she's pulling you into it without your consent." Dangerous. That word hit me like a punch. I tried to steady myself, palms sweating against my jeans. "She won't tell you because she's trying to protect herself," the neighbor continued. "But I think you deserve to know exactly who you married." I swallowed hard. For a second, I pictured my wife back in the kitchen, wiping that counter, avoiding my eyes. That crack in her voice during the toast. The way her fingers lingered on her wine glass like she didn't know if she should let go. "What does she want from you?" I asked. The neighbor clicked through photos. My wife photographing letters, old files, receipts, legal papers with highlighted sections. She moved them with gloves on, careful not to leave prints. That detail made my stomach twist harder than anything else. "She thinks I'm hiding something related to her past," the neighbor said softly. And she's right. I jerked my head up, pulse hammering. "What past?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into a drawer beneath the bench and pulled out a folder, sliding it toward me like it weighed more than it looked. "Your wife," she said, her voice barely audible, "had a different name before she met you. And she didn't change it for a fresh start. She changed it because she was running from someone." My pulse stuttered. I didn't speak. I couldn't. "Before you judge her," the neighbor whispered, her hand briefly resting on mine. Too warm, too intentional. "Let me show you who she really is." The room seemed to shrink, the walls pushing closer, her touch lingering longer than it should. And for the first time all night, anger took shape inside me. Not sharp, not loud, but heavy and dark, sitting low in my gut. I realized something in that moment. This wasn't just about a strange toast, or a distant look, or even secret videos. My wife was hiding a past I never knew existed, and the neighbor, standing too close, breathing too softly, was about to drag me straight into it. I didn't open the folder right away. I just stared at it, this bland manila thing sitting between us like it was waiting to explode. My wife's name, her current name, was written in black marker across the top, but the neighbor had crossed it out with a single dark slash and written another name underneath. A name I'd never heard before. A name that felt wrong in my mouth when I whispered it out loud. She watched me with this strange mixture of sympathy and calculation, like she wasn't sure whether to comfort me or continue unraveling my world. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," she murmured, but her voice didn't sound sorry. "But she's not who you think she is." I forced myself to open the folder. Inside were photocopies of IDs, old addresses, employment records, even a faded photo of a younger version of my wife. Hair shorter, expression harder, posture tense like she was bracing for impact. It didn't look like a rebellious phase or a college experiment. It looked like someone on the edge of running. "I don't understand," I whispered. My throat felt tight. "Why the hell do you have all this?" She drew in a slow breath and leaned against the workbench, folding her arms across her sweater. "Because she wasn't the first woman who changed her name on this street. And when she moved in, I recognized the signs." "The signs of what?" The neighbor hesitated just long enough to make my skin crawl, then lowered her voice again, like the garage walls might be listening. "The signs of someone hiding from a man she didn't think she could escape." My heartbeat slowed in that heavy, dread-filled way that tells you your life is about to split into before and after. I thought of my wife's toast, how her voice had cracked on the word miss, how she'd kept avoiding my eyes, how she'd clung to the counter like it was the only solid thing left in her life. "She never told you," the neighbor continued, "because if he ever found her, he'd go through you to get to her." I flinched. She didn't. And she knows it. I shook my head. No, she would have told me. She trusts me." "Then why is she sneaking into my house looking for files on her old life?" she snapped, her voice sharp for the first time. "You think she wants you involved? You think she wants you hurt?" I didn't answer, because truthfully, I didn't know. She stepped closer, not seductively, but deliberately, like she needed me to believe her. Still, the heat from her body, the faint scent of vanilla on her skin, the focused intensity in her eyes, it all made the air between us feel charged in a way I didn't like, or maybe in a way I liked too much, considering the circumstances. "She changed her name," the neighbor said softly. "She changed her job. She changed her entire life. People don't do that unless they're terrified of the person they used to be connected to." I looked back down at the folder, at the younger version of my wife staring out from that old ID photo. She looked the way she had during her toast, haunted, detached, like she wasn't sure she belonged anywhere. "But she told me she moved here for a fresh start," I whispered. "She did, just not the fresh start you think." I pressed my hands against my eyes, trying to think, trying to breathe, but everything felt distorted, off balance. It wasn't the betrayal of another man. It wasn't infidelity, or losing attraction, or drifting apart. It was worse. She had lived an entire life before me, and I hadn't even known her real name. "What does she want from you?" I finally asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Why my wife? Why your house?" The neighbor's jaw tightened. "Because I have documents related to her old identity. Evidence her past isn't as buried as she wishes, and she wants to know what I know." Her fingers brushed mine again. Accidental or intentional, I couldn't tell, and the contact sent a faint tension through me. Not attraction exactly, but something intertwined with shock and adrenaline. "What do you know?" I asked. She held my gaze, eyes steady, voice low. "I know who she used to be." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The garage hummed, the lamp buzzed softly, and my mind raced with images of my wife, laughing in our kitchen, curled against me in bed, whispering my name when she wanted me, her body warm and soft beneath mine. That woman felt real. This stranger in the folder did not. "She's not dangerous," the neighbor said gently. "But the people she crossed might be." My breath caught. "And I think they're close." Something cold slid down my spine. She wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't spinning a story. She believed every word. And suddenly, a new dread crept in as I remembered the silver sedan I'd seen twice that week at the end of our street, a car I'd dismissed as a coincidence. I didn't yet know that it wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the videos, the old ID, the glances my wife had been avoiding for weeks. Even lying beside her felt wrong, like sharing a bed with a stranger I was suddenly afraid to wake. She slept curled away from me, her back tense beneath the blankets, her breathing too shallow to be peaceful. Once, when I shifted, she jolted like she'd been startled out of a nightmare, clutching the sheet against her chest before realizing I was the one beside her. She whispered, "Sorry," but her voice trembled, and the apology sounded like it had nothing to do with sleep. By morning, the distance between us felt like miles. I tried to ask gently at first, just a simple, "Are you okay?" But she kept giving me these hollow smiles that didn't touch her eyes. Whenever I got too close, she'd brush past me, touching my arm lightly like she was trying to soothe me while keeping herself out of reach. There was a moment in the kitchen when her robe slipped off one shoulder, revealing a sliver of bare skin, and for a second I saw the woman I used to know, the woman who used to press that same shoulder against my lips after sex, whispering that she felt safe with me. Now she pulled the fabric up like she'd been exposed. Around noon, I finally asked the question that had been eating me alive. "What did you mean last night?" My voice was steady, but barely. "When you said you miss who you used to be." She froze, hand hovering above the sink. A tiny drop of water slid down her wrist, and she watched it the way someone watches a fuse burn. "It was just a metaphor," she murmured, her throat tightening on the last word. "No, it wasn't." She squeezed her eyes shut. Her shoulders rose like she was bracing for impact. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me. Her lips parted, her breath shaky, and I took a small step toward her because I couldn't stand the distance anymore. But then she whispered, "Please don't push me." And the way she said it, like the walls were listening, like the air itself was dangerous, made something cold settle in my chest. Before I could ask anything else, she turned away and pretended to start making tea. She dropped the kettle lid twice. Her hands were shaking too much for the lie she was trying to hold. I stepped outside because being near her without answers felt unbearable. The afternoon sun was bright enough to sting my eyes, and that was when I saw it again. The silver sedan parked further down the street, angled just enough to see our house. Same car, same tinted windows. My pulse kicked hard. I approached it slowly, not aggressively, just enough to make whoever was inside know I'd noticed. But the moment I reached the sidewalk near the passenger door, the engine started. The car didn't peel away dramatically. It glided off calmly, deliberately, as if the driver had been instructed not to draw attention. A controlled exit, a practiced one. My stomach twisted. When I went back inside, my wife was standing at the window, staring at the empty stretch of street where the car had been. Her face was drained of color. "You saw him, didn't you?" she whispered. "Who?" She swallowed so hard I heard it. "Never mind. It doesn't matter." "It does matter." Her eyes met mine for the first time in days, and there was a flash of pure, unfiltered fear that made my breath catch. For a split second, I wanted to pull her into my arms, hold her against me the way I used to when things felt too heavy for her. That instinct, to protect, to shelter, rose up so sharply it almost hurt. But she stepped back before I reached her. "I can handle it," she said softly, voice cracking at the edges. "You're not handling anything," I snapped before I could stop myself. "You're shutting me out. You're disappearing." She flinched, not from my tone. She'd heard me frustrated before, but from the truth in it. Then she looked toward the hallway, like she expected someone else to appear around the corner. I just need time," she whispered. "No more metaphors," I replied. Tell me what's going on." Her lips trembled. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her robe until her knuckles whitened. She leaned against the counter as if her legs weren't steady enough to hold her. "I can't yet," she said, voice barely audible. "It's not safe." Not safe. The neighbor's words came back at me with a punch. People don't change their identity unless they're running from someone. I looked at my wife, my beautiful, terrified wife, and despite the fear building inside me, something else flickered too. Something darker. Something that tasted like anger and betrayal and the sickening realization that I'd been living beside a shadow instead of a woman who trusted me. I stepped back, needing air, needing distance. Her eyes followed me with a desperation she didn't dare speak aloud, and that was when the doorbell rang. Not loud, just 2 soft chimes, but they froze us both. She grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin softly, frantically. "Don't answer it," she whispered. Her voice wasn't just scared, it was pleading. I stood completely still, because the plea told me one thing with absolute, shattering clarity. Whoever she was running from had just found us. I didn't answer the door. I didn't even breathe for a moment. My wife's fingers tightened around my wrist like she was trying to anchor herself, like if she let go, she might fall straight through the floor. Her eyes were wide and raw, the kind of fear that comes from remembering instead of imagining. Whoever was on the other side of that door didn't knock again. They just waited. A stillness settled through the house, sharp enough to cut. After a minute that felt like an hour, the person walked away. Soft steps, controlled, almost polite. That was what made it worse. Fear screams. Control whispers. My wife let go of me like her hand had suddenly gone numb. She backed up until her spine hit the wall, covering her mouth, shaking. I reached for her, instinct kicking in, but she shook her head hard, silently begging me not to touch her. I'd never seen her refuse comfort from me. It felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. I forced my voice to stay calm. "I'm going to look outside." "No, please," she whispered, but I was already moving. When I opened the curtains, the street was empty. Quiet. Too quiet. But halfway down the block, the silver sedan idled for just a moment before pulling away. I caught a brief glimpse of the driver's silhouette. Broad shoulders, still posture, like a statue behind the wheel. He didn't even glance back at our house. My wife was trembling when I returned. Not crying. Crying would have been normal. This was something colder, deeper. Like she'd stepped back into a memory she'd spent years clawing her way out of. When I crouched in front of her, her breath hitched, and her eyes slid away from mine. "Tell me who he is," I said softly. "I can't," she whispered. "Not yet." That was when the frustration finally cracked through my fear. "Not yet? He's watching our house. He's following us. You're terrified and you won't tell me why. What am I supposed to do with that?" She pressed her hands to her face. "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection," I snapped. "I need the truth." Her shoulders collapsed, and for a moment I thought she might break open and finally tell me everything. But instead she whispered, "It's safer if you don't know." I stood, my pulse pounding in my ears because the truth was simple. I didn't believe her. Not fully. Not anymore. The fear in her eyes was real, yes, but there was something else underneath it. Shame. Secrets. Choices she'd made long before she met me. I didn't say anything. I just walked out the front door. I wasn't heading toward the silver sedan. I knew that was pointless. Instead, my feet carried me straight to the one person who had been desperate to tell me her version of the truth. The neighbor opened her door before I even knocked, like she'd been watching, like she'd been waiting. "She's lying to you," she murmured, pulling me inside before anyone on the street could see. Her fingers brushed my arm, light, lingering in a way that sent an uncomfortable heat up my neck. Not quite flirtation, but close. Too close. "Whatever she said just now, I promise you it's not the full story." "She's scared," I said, trying to keep emotion out of my voice. "And she should be." The neighbor locked the door behind us. but not for the reasons she's telling you. I turned on her. You've been filming her, collecting documents on her, spying, and somehow I'm supposed to believe you're the one looking out for me. Her jaw flexed, but she didn't deny it. She walked to the kitchen table, grabbed a thick folder, and dropped it in front of me. I didn't record her because I want to hurt you. I recorded her because she was breaking into my house repeatedly and digging into my personal files. Then why not go to the police? She laughed, short, harsh. Because the police can't help me with what she's doing. Then her voice softened into something colder. I'm in the middle of a very ugly legal battle with my ex-husband. Your wife knows it, and she was trying to find proof that could ruin me. My stomach twisted. Why would my wife care about your divorce? The neighbor's gaze locked onto mine, intense enough to pin me in place. Because she thought I was digging into her old identity. She thought I had information she couldn't let anyone use against her. I froze. She wanted leverage, the neighbor whispered. She wasn't protecting your marriage. She was protecting herself. The room tilted, something dark and bitter rising in my throat. For the first time, I imagined my wife standing in this house, rifling through drawers with gloved hands. Not out of fear, but out of calculation. But the neighbor wasn't finished. You think I'm helping you, she said, stepping closer until I could feel the warmth of her breath. But the truth is, I was trying to use her too. I stared at her. She exhaled, defeated. Your wife has a past that could blow up my case. I needed to know if I could use it. But I swear, I never meant for you to get caught in the middle. Her confession landed hard. So, you're not protecting me, I said quietly. You're trying to survive your own war. She nodded, her eyes softening. And she's trying to survive hers. I felt the weight of that, the exhaustion in her voice, the danger pressing in from all sides. But beneath everything, messy truth, fear, betrayal, a new question rose. If the neighbor wasn't the threat, then who the hell was the man in the silver car? Because whoever he was, my wife had reacted like he owned her shadow. I don't know how long I stood on the neighbor's porch after leaving her house. Maybe a minute, maybe an hour. The cold air felt sharper than it should have, like it was trying to cut through the confusion spinning in my head. My wife wasn't the villain the neighbor wanted me to believe, and the neighbor wasn't the ally she pretended to be. They were both hiding something from me, circling each other like two wounded animals protecting whatever scraps of their old lives they had left. But only one of them shared my bed. Only one of them had whispered my name in the dark. Only one had promised me a life built on honesty, on trust, on choosing each other every day. And she'd lied about the most fundamental thing a person could lie about. When I walked back into our house, the lights were off except for the lamp beside the couch. She was sitting there, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her ribs together. When she lifted her head, her eyes were rimmed red, not from crying, but from holding everything in. You talked to her, she said, not a question. Yes. She exhaled, long and shaky. What did she tell you? The truth, I answered, even though I wasn't sure either of them deserved that word. Her eyes closed. Then I guess it's time you hear it from me. I sat across from her, not next to her, not touching her, and the space between us felt heavier than anything she was about to say. She looked at my hands before she looked at my face, like she was checking for signs of anger she'd have to brace against. What's your real name? I asked quietly. She flinched, and for a heartbeat, all I saw was the woman from the old ID photo, thinner, younger, hollowed out. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. She looked down at her fingers twisting in her lap. It used to be Anna. A humorless smile tugged at her lips. I haven't said that name out loud in years. I waited. The silence pressed in until she finally let out a trembling breath. I didn't change my name to escape a crime. I didn't hurt anyone. I wasn't running from the law or hiding something I did. She paused, swallowing hard. I was running from someone who wouldn't let me exist without belonging to him. I felt my jaw clench. Your ex. She nodded. We were together for 3 years. On paper, he looked perfect, wealthy, charming, connected. Everyone loved him. But behind closed doors, he controlled everything. Who I talked to, what I wore, where I worked. And when sex happened, it wasn't because I wanted it. It was because he expected it. And I thought giving in was better than fighting. Her voice cracked on the word sex, not from shame, but from the weight of remembering. I leaned forward, but she held up a hand. Please, let me finish. I forced myself still. He threatened to ruin my life if I ever left. Said he had friends in high places. Said I was nothing without him. And when I finally tried to run, he sent people after me. Not to hurt me, just to bring me back. She shivered, rubbing her arms, like I was property. And the man in the silver car? I asked. Her gaze lifted to mine, and the terror in her eyes told me everything before she even spoke. He works for him. He's been following me for months, waiting for me to slip, waiting for me to go somewhere alone. My stomach twisted painfully. Why didn't you tell me? Her answer was immediate. Because you're the first person I've ever felt safe with. And I knew the moment I told you, I'd lose that. You'd either look at me differently, or you'd get dragged into it. And I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't let him destroy another part of my life. My anger evaporated. Not the anger at the secrets, but the anger at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. The way she jumped when doors closed too loudly. The way she tensed when someone walked too close behind her. The way she clung to me after sex sometimes, her breathing shallow like she was waiting for something terrible that never came. I moved to the couch slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. Instead, she leaned into me like her body had been craving warmth it didn't feel worthy of. He's here, she whispered into my shoulder. He finally found me. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling every tremor in her body, every deep bruise that never touched her skin. She pressed her forehead into my chest, breathing like she was afraid of what would happen if she stopped. We'll deal with him, I murmured. Together. She shook her head. You don't understand how powerful he is. And you don't understand how far I'll go to protect you. For the first time since the toast, she looked at me with something other than fear. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. But while she finally let her truth spill into my hands, she didn't yet know that the neighbor had her own agenda. And none of us knew the ex was already closer than we assumed. I didn't realize how fast fear could grow roots until that night. After my wife finally told me everything, after she cried into my chest like every breath might shatter her, something inside me shifted. The fear didn't leave, but it changed shape. It wasn't the kind that froze me anymore. It was the kind that sharpened my thoughts, made every sound outside feel like a threat I was ready to confront. And the first threat came sooner than either of us expected. Around 10 p.m., we were in the living room with all the lights off, sitting close but not quite touching. She kept picking at the seam of the couch cushion, her breath shallow. I had one arm behind her, not holding her, just close enough to show her she wasn't alone. There was this subtle electricity between us, not sexual exactly, but something intimate and trembling, like the vulnerability had cracked us open, and we didn't know how to put ourselves back together. She whispered, "He's not going to give up." I whispered back, "Neither am I." Before she could answer, the sound of a car door closing echoed from just outside. Not a slam, a quiet, deliberate click. My wife flinched so hard she pressed her shoulder into me, fingers clutching my shirt like she couldn't help herself. I placed a steadying hand on her thigh, soft, slow, reassuring. It wasn't sexual, but the closeness of her warmth under my palm made my chest ache. She whispered, "He's here," and I didn't doubt her for a second. I moved to the window, keeping low. The silver sedan sat directly in front of our house now, not 3 doors down. The streetlight caught the windshield just right, and for the first time, I saw him, her ex, standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, staring straight at our house like he already owned it. He didn't look angry. That scared me more than anything. He looked calm, confident, like he'd been waiting years for this moment and was finally ready to collect what he believed belonged to him. My wife whispered my name in a voice I'd never heard from her. Fragile, desperate. Please don't go out there. He'll twist everything. He always does. I turned toward her, and the look in her eyes hit me harder than seeing the man himself. She was terrified for me, not just of him. That twisted something deep in my chest. I knelt in front of her, touched her face gently, my thumb brushing her cheekbone in this slow, familiar way that made her lean into my palm like she needed the contact to stay grounded. "I'm not letting him near you," I said softly. "Not tonight. Not ever." She closed her eyes and whispered, "I don't deserve you." My breath caught in my throat. "You deserve someone who actually sees you." When she opened her eyes, there was this flicker. Fear, yes, but something else too. Something warm and painfully real. But before either of us could speak again, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. A text with no introduction. "Tell her to come outside. It'll go easier this time." My wife saw it over my shoulder and slapped a hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. She whispered, "He must have gotten my new number blocked and used yours instead." Another text came. "Or I come in." Something primal snapped inside me. I stood up so fast she reached for me, grabbing my wrist again, shaking her head, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Please, don't do anything stupid." "I'm not," I said, though my pulse was pounding. "I'm doing what I should have done the moment he showed up." But before I could even take a step, we heard another sound, this sharp, nervous tapping on the side door of the house. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't threatening. It was frantic. The neighbor. My wife stiffened, her expression turning from fear to something like betrayal. "Why is she here?" "I don't know," I said, though deep down I suspected nothing good. I opened the side door only a crack, and the neighbor pushed her way inside, breathless, hair messy, eyes darting toward the street. She looked nothing like the cool, manipulative woman from earlier. She looked terrified. "He's not just here for her," she whispered urgently. "He came to my house first." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because he thinks I know where her old documents are," she said, clutching her sweater to her chest. "He thinks I'm helping her hide, and he's not alone." My wife stood up slowly, her face pale, her hands trembling so violently she had to press them against the wall to steady herself. "He brought the investigator," she whispered, "and probably someone else." Through the window, I saw movement. 2 shadows, not one. The investigator stepping out of the sedan, and another man coming around from the other side. They were preparing to approach the house. My wife whispered, "This is how it starts. He isolates. Then he closes in." The neighbor grabbed my arm, nails digging deep enough to sting. "We're all in danger now. Whatever lines he wouldn't cross before, he's ready to cross them tonight." I looked between the 2 women, my wife trembling but standing, the neighbor panicked but still calculating, and every instinct in me screamed one thing. I had to take control before her past swallowed all of us. And I didn't yet know it, but this wasn't chaos. This was the beginning of war. The moment I realized we were surrounded, her ex on the sidewalk, the investigator beside him, and another man lingering near the edge of the driveway, something inside me went cold in a way I'd never felt before. Not panic, not dread, strategy. A clarity that came from knowing no one else in this house was capable of protecting us right now. My wife stood frozen near the hallway, fingers pressed to her lips. The neighbor hovered beside me, breath shaky, eyes darting everywhere like a cornered animal. For a second I saw the truth in both of them. 2 women who'd spent years running from the same kind of man. They looked different on the surface, but the same fear lived in their bones. "Both of you," I whispered. "We need to move. Now. Away from the windows." My wife hesitated, then took 2 small steps toward me. That tiny movement, barefoot, frightened, trusting, hit me harder than anything else tonight. She didn't reach for my hand, but her body tilted toward mine like gravity itself pulled her in. The neighbor followed, clutching her elbows like she was holding herself together. I locked the doors quietly, pulled the curtains shut, and scanned the room for anything that could give me an advantage. I wasn't going to fight them, not physically. Her ex had money, resources, men trained to intimidate. I wasn't stupid, but I didn't need to fight him. I needed to expose him. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the text messages he'd sent me, and took screenshots. Then I opened the folder the neighbor had given me, her receipts, the videos, everything my wife didn't know I had yet, and I snapped pictures of every page. My wife whispered, "What are you doing?" "Making sure if anything happens tonight," I said. "The police have every piece of evidence they need." "But they won't act," she replied, her voice breaking. "He has connections." "Not where I'm sending this," I cut in. The neighbor, breathing faster, whispered, "To who?" "To everyone," I said. And I meant it. If her ex wanted to play intimidation, I'd drown him in exposure. Police reports, domestic abuse forums, legal advocacy networks, every journalist in the state with an inbox, his business partners, if I could find them. His reputation wasn't just crackable, it was fragile as hell once the truth came out. My wife stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Not scared, shaken, amazed, like she was realizing something new about the man she'd married. But there was something I couldn't ignore any longer, something I needed from her. "Where are your documents?" I asked. "The ones from your old life, the ones you didn't want anyone to find." She stiffened, eyes flicking toward the attic door at the end of the hall before she caught herself. Too late. The neighbor noticed. She stepped closer to me, not touching, but invading my space in a way that felt intentional. "Whatever she's hiding up there," she murmured, "it might be the only thing that saves us." My wife shot her a look sharp enough to cut. "This doesn't involve you anymore," she snapped. "Oh, it involves me," the neighbor whispered, stepping closer to her instead. "Your ex threatened me tonight. He knows you were in my house. He thinks I know where your documents are. Believe me, I am involved whether I want to be or not." The tension between them was electric. Fear, anger, resentment, and beneath it, something else I couldn't quite name. My wife's shoulders squared, and for a moment she looked almost fierce, like the woman she'd been before her ex broke pieces of her. But fear won. It always does at first. "Those papers can't help us," she said. "They'll only make things worse." "How?" I asked. Her eyes met mine with a painful softness. "Because they show what he was capable of, and he'll destroy anyone who sees them." The neighbor laughed quietly, bitterly. "He's already trying." A soft thud sounded outside, then another. Footsteps on the porch. My adrenaline spiked. My wife pressed close to me, her hand gripping my shirt, this time not in fear of me leaving, but begging me not to move away. The heat of her body against my side sent a protective fierceness through me. I leaned down and whispered, "I need those documents." Her breath faltered. "I can't." "You can," I murmured, "and you need to." I cupped her cheek with one hand, gently, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she pressed into my touch, eyes fluttering shut for a second like she needed that warmth just to stay standing. "He won't stop," I said. "Not until we destroy the version of him that still thinks he owns you." Another thud on the porch. More footsteps. A shadow crossed the window. My wife's pulse raced beneath my fingertips. Finally, she whispered, "Fine. The documents are in the attic. But you need to understand, once you see them, there's no undoing anything. You'll be in this with me for the rest of your life." I didn't hesitate. Good. For the first time that night, something like strength flickered behind her fear. But the neighbor grabbed my arm suddenly, fear turning to panic. "You don't get it," she whispered. "If you go up there now, they'll break in while you're gone." Another knock, harder this time, intentional. My wife whispered, "Then what do we do?" I stepped between both women, staring toward the front door as a cold, determined calm settled into me. "We stall," I said quietly, "and then we end this." I didn't know it yet, but the attic held more than just her documents. It held the first piece of revenge that would shatter her ex's entire world. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it had started, which somehow made everything worse. Silence pressed against the walls like a held breath, and all three of us stood there, frozen, listening, waiting for the next move. My wife was pressed against my side, her fingers gripping the back of my shirt. The neighbor hovered by the kitchen doorway, her chest heaving, eyes glued to the front window like she expected it to shatter inward. I turned to my wife. "Show me the documents. Now." She hesitated, just long enough for fear to flicker through her expression, then nodded and slipped her trembling hand into mine. She didn't say anything, but the way her fingers curled into my palm was enough. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't desperate. It was trust, raw and shaking. We moved down the hallway, the neighbor following close behind. Every floorboard creak felt like a warning, and the house seemed to shrink around us, as if we were moving deeper into a place where truths couldn't hide anymore. My wife reached up and pulled the string hanging from the attic hatch. The ladder unfolded with a soft groan. "I'll go first," I whispered. She didn't argue. I climbed into the attic, dark, dusty, cramped, and my wife followed, her breath quick and uneven behind me. The neighbor stayed at the bottom of the ladder, watching the hallway, whispering urgently, "Hurry." My wife crossed the attic, stepping over boxes with familiarity that made my chest tighten. She'd been up here many times alone, carrying a secret she hadn't trusted me with. When she knelt beside an old trunk tucked beneath a beam, her hands trembled so badly she had to swallow twice before she could open the latch. "This is everything," she whispered. "Everything I never wanted to see again." Inside were rows of folders, some labeled with dates, others with names I didn't recognize. Beneath them sat a small audio recorder, old, scratched, but intact. She reached for it with fingers that shook harder the closer they got. "This is his voice," she said, her breath catching. 2 years of threats, confessions, manipulation. I recorded everything. I thought, one day I might need it. I lifted one of the folders. Inside were financial statements, fraud, money transfers from his business accounts under fake client names, documents showing he stole from investors. There were also photos of bruises on her ribs, her arms, her thighs. Not fresh, years old. Faded but unmistakable. My stomach twisted violently. "How did you get these?" I asked. "He left his accounts unlocked sometimes," she said quietly. "He thought I was too stupid to understand what I was looking at." She gave a humorless laugh. "He underestimated me." I opened another folder. More evidence, more corruption, more of the man standing outside, pretending he had a right to her. My wife whispered, "I kept all of it. I thought maybe one day I'd give it to a lawyer, but I was too scared he'd find out. Then I met you, and for a while, I felt safe. Safe enough to hope I'd never need any of this." Her voice cracked. "Safe enough to pretend my past couldn't catch up." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. She let her fingers slide between mine, her skin warm and trembling. The neighbor whispered harshly from below, "They're walking around the house. I hear them. Please, whatever you're doing, finish it." My wife exhaled shakily. "Take what you can. Use it. Just don't listen to the recordings unless you have to. I don't want you to hear him talk about me like I'm—" Her voice broke. I squeezed her hand. "I only need enough to destroy him publicly." She nodded, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "Then take the finance folder, the audio files, and that envelope at the bottom." I lifted it. Thick, heavy, sealed. "What's in it?" I asked. "Proof he committed perjury," she whispered. "He lied under oath in a case years ago. If that gets out, his career dies, and he knows it." Below us, the neighbor hissed urgently, "They're coming to the back door. Hurry." I stuffed the documents into my jacket, along with the recorder and the envelope, and helped my wife back down the ladder. The neighbor turned wide eyes toward my wife. "You had all of this," she whispered. "All this time." My wife didn't flinch. "I wasn't hiding it from you. I was hiding it from him." The neighbor swallowed hard. "Do you know what this means? This is enough to crush him. Completely." My wife nodded. "That's why I kept it." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Another text. "Last warning." My wife closed her eyes, inhaled, and whispered, "It's time." But before I could decide what the next move was, my wife stepped forward, surprising both me and the neighbor. She touched my arm, gentle but steady. "You're not the only one who's been planning for this," she whispered. "I was just too afraid to use what I had." She looked at the door, fear shifting into something sharper, something like resolve. "He ruined years of my life," she said quietly. "And tonight, we end him." The neighbor's eyes widened. "You're actually going through with this?" My wife nodded. "With him here, with what he's doing, I'm done running." She turned back to me, her fingers brushing my chest. Soft, warm, intimate in a way that felt different from earlier, like she wasn't reaching for protection anymore. She was reaching for partnership. "For the first time," she whispered, "I'm ready to fight." And with the evidence in my pocket, the recordings in my hand, and her standing beside me, not trembling but determined, I finally understood. This wasn't just my revenge anymore. It was ours. I've replayed that night in my head so many times that the memory feels worn smooth, like a stone you keep in your pocket. Not because I regret it, because that was the night my wife stopped running, the night I realized how far I would go to protect her, and the night her ex learned that fear only works on people who have something left to lose. We didn't open the door, not willingly. We waited until he and his men circled toward the back, shadows passing beneath the kitchen window like sharks searching for an opening. The neighbor was shaking so hard she had to hold onto the counter, but my wife, God, I will never forget this. My wife stood straighter than I'd ever seen her. Her fear was still there, sure, but something else had taken root beside it. The exact spark she'd lost the night she fled him. It was back, and she wasn't giving it up again. I grabbed my phone, thumb hovering over the list of recipients I'd compiled. Legal aid groups, investigative reporters, every attorney connected to her ex's business dealings. The evidence was already packaged, uploaded, prepped. All I needed to do was hit send. My wife's voice, low and steady, came from beside me. "Do it." I pressed the screen. The files sent. The audio recordings uploaded. The financial fraud documents delivered. The perjury envelope scanned and forwarded to 3 lawyers known for tearing men like him to shreds. A digital explosion detonated silently across dozens of inboxes. And at that exact moment, someone slammed against the back door. My wife didn't scream. The neighbor did, but my wife didn't. She grabbed my arm, pulled me close, whispered, "Don't let him inside." Her breath was warm against my neck, trembling but purposeful. Her fingertips pressed into my skin, grounding both of us. Another slam, louder. The frame rattled. He shouted her name, not her new one, her old one. Anna, the way he used to say it. Sharp, like it belonged to him. My wife's jaw clenched so hard I heard her teeth grind. Then the porch light flicked on. The neighbor had hit the switch, and it illuminated something I don't think her ex had expected. The 2 of us standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the door together. My wife no longer hiding behind me. She looked right through the glass, straight at him. He froze. His face went pale. For the first time, he looked unsure, because he recognized the look in her eyes. It wasn't fear anymore. It was defiance. A woman who'd survived him, built a new life, loved someone who didn't break her, and refused to ever go back. He shouted something again, but the investigator tugged his sleeve urgently, pointing at his phone. A cascade of alerts must have been lighting up their screens. Emails, recordings, evidence. his entire life unraveling in real time. My wife stepped closer to the door, voice steady. "You don't own me anymore." Her ex's face twisted. Rage, panic, denial. But beneath it all, the faintest flicker of fear. "Leave," she said. He took a step back, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. The investigator whispered something to him. Another phone alert chimed, and then, like the coward he'd always been, he turned away, storming back toward the silver sedan while spitting curses under his breath. But the most satisfying part wasn't that he left. It was the sound, faint, sweet, unmistakable, of police sirens approaching from down the block. Not one car, two. Someone from the journalism list had already forwarded the evidence to authorities, and someone at the station took it seriously. Her ex and the investigator froze in the driveway like animals caught in headlights. When the cops approached, my wife didn't run. She didn't hide. She opened the front door and walked out with her shoulders squared and her chin raised. I followed right behind her. The neighbor stood in the doorway watching everything, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The officers asked questions. My wife answered clearly, steadily. I handed over the digital package I'd prepared. The neighbor handed over her own evidence of being approached and threatened. The investigator tried to speak for her ex, but the officers shut him down fast. And then it happened. They arrested him. Right there in front of our house. Handcuffs. Rights read aloud. His face twisted in a mix of shock and fury. He shouted her old name again, but it didn't matter. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. She looked at me. And for the first time in all the years I'd known her, something in her eyes looked free. In the days that followed, everything moved fast. Reporters called, lawyers called, agencies asked for statements. The neighbor got protection. My wife got legal confirmation that her new identity couldn't be challenged. And her ex, drowning under the weight of financial fraud, perjury, stalking, and recorded abuse, watched his empire collapse one headline at a time. The neighbor apologized, not in words, but in actions. She testified. She handed over everything she'd collected. She stopped looking at my wife like a threat. She started looking at her like a survivor. And my wife, she apologized too. Not with guilt, with truth. "I wasn't missing who I used to be," she whispered one night, her forehead against mine. "I was grieving the girl he took from me, the girl who didn't believe she deserved this kind of love." I kissed her forehead softly. "You deserve everything." She looked at me with a tenderness that felt like healing in real time. "Thank you for fighting with me. Always." We weren't perfect after that. Trauma doesn't evaporate. Fear leaves echoes. But she stopped running. She started reclaiming. And every night when she curled against me, no part of her body flinched. Not even once. Because she wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. And the man who once tried to own her, he was the one who ended up losing everything.